Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Recovery Stories. My name is Patrick Custer. I'm the National Director of Alumni for Promises Behavioral Health. We bring this podcast to you every week. We're so glad that you're here. Hope you stick around for a wonderful hour of hope and recovery right after this brief message. We are live
Stop Facebook!
where a number of people have
The opportunity to share.
She's one of our own. It has been
They aren't like
parts to your story that's awesome. You found healing. You found,
until I got sober.
can't wait for her to share the different aspects of your story and what. Awesome.
Right.
Welcome back, everybody. My name is Patrick Custer. Again, I'm so excited to be here and have our guest today, a new member of our family at the Rooted Alumni Program for Promises Behavioral Health. Nic, welcome to the show.
Hey, everybody. I'm glad to be here.
So glad to have you. So, Nic is a brand new member of our staff family for alumni at our Right Step Hill Country location in Texas. And we're so excited to have him on board and also to get on here and introduce himself and just kind of share about his life and recovery and all the things that have brought him to this point. So tell us a little bit about the beginning for you, paint that picture of, what was your family like and the person you started out as before struggles.
Yeah. So, born and raised in Texas, we kind of hopped around as I kind of grew up, the major cities. So Houston was where I was born, moved to Dallas, lived in San Antonio, and then ended up in Austin, as I was older. But family was typical in the way, we were middle class, and then really kind of from there, my dad progressed in his career and kind of like started, hard worker and very career driven. So that was definitely something that I watched as I grew up. So as far as the family dynamic, both of my parents were heavy drinkers. That really affected the way the house functioned. Really kind of felt that as a kid. Definitely had very frequent visits from law enforcement.
Oh, wow.
Really kind of very turbulent. I had 5 siblings as well. So 4 sisters and 1 brother. Both my parents were married prior. So they basically, I had 2 older sisters on my dad's side and 1 older sister on my mom's side. So we were all in the mix, really kind of experience in life, and there were definitely great parts of my childhood. And I think that as I've gotten older and as I've kind of walked through some of these things, I know my parents did the best that they could with the tools that they were given. But the kind of process of going through that, I think that it affected us all, with the heavy drinking, not really knowing what the day was going to look like. I remember be well after dark and just really trying to avoid going home because I was just nervous of what, was really kind of what that was going to be, any given time. And so, and all of my siblings kind of experienced the same thing. Going forward, we stayed in Houston for a while. This was kind of the time I had my first drink. I don't exactly remember what age it was, but it's a bit of a funny story. I don't know if anybody remembers. I think they're actually having a comeback, Zima. So my first drink was an actual old school Zima. So it was pretty hardcore. So
yeah.
But yeah, that was the first drink I ever had. I remember basically my mom gave me and my younger brother, probably just was trying to get rid of us during a get together or something like that. And so we had it, and I don't remember being too affected other than the fact that I fell asleep. And it didn't, there was no chasing that. And a part of that might've been because I was so young. But I do significantly remember the first time I was altered, you know? And so, going through the childhood, again, I do want to press that, you know, the household was very, very turbulent. You know,
Sure.
That continued. My parents actually got a divorce twice, so they got remarried and they tried again, and they really gave it their all, for sure. So we moved to Dallas later on. I was probably 8 or 9 or so when we moved to Dallas, and this is where they got remarried. They tried to do another, you know, move into another home. They also had my youngest sister, the baby of the family, kind of during that time, and it just wasn't working out. You know, there was still they brought all of the same things, you know, to Dallas with us, and that's where they got their final divorce. It was very interesting during that process that I had gotten exposed to a lot of therapy during that time, which was good in the sense that I think I was able to actually talk about internally what was going on, and all of my brothers and sisters were also given that same opportunity. But you know, it was also kind of a messy divorce, and so some of those things were utilized in a way that also had kind of a impact with trust, and you know, both parents getting their own therapist, and so it's interesting when I look back on my recent, or my very early stages of being exposed to therapy. And so and that goes on kind of through my story, but kind of.
I have a quick question before we move forward. So how old were you, do you think, when you realized my family's different? Like there's things happening that maybe either shouldn't happen, or, you know, I've got a lot of friends that I don't think this kind of stuff is going on at their house.
You know,
or did you know? Did you know?
I did definitely know. I knew that I was different, you know, in the sense that the things that were populating my thoughts and my mind during that time. But it was also something I didn't really talk about, you know, like I didn't go to school talking about what was going on. I think that I really wanted that disconnection from the house, you know, and so I just, you know, I was kind of the kid, especially early on. I was the kid that other parents were like, what are you still doing out, you know? And it was a lot because I really did not want to go home.
Yeah.
And so I would say probably later grade school years, you know, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade is when I think some of the therapy, and then they also kind of got in touch with the school as well. So there was like some school therapists that would, or counselors that would see me, and you know, could really tell that I was going and struggling. So I got in touch with there was some big brother, big sister programs and things like that would meet me at school. And I thought that was really cool because I would get out of class and be able to hang out, you know, with these older kids and do fun things. So, but I think looking back on it, it's hard for me to ever really see like, oh, I'm different than others. Later on that came, but as far as a pronounced moment, it's hard for me to really think about.
Sure. Okay.
I think I had a lot of therapy as well that kind of was telling me, that this is, you're going through something. You're going through a hard time. So, but yeah, I appreciate that question. It makes me think about it.
Yeah. Sure. So, talking about that second divorce, how old were you, and what was, kind of what developed after that for you in life?
Sure. So I was probably in the about third grade when that happened. Very quickly after that divorce, I think it's my dad ended up getting custody. My mom was actually had just been involved with being arrested and things like that for some stuff, some domestic stuff that happened in the household, and so it was pretty apparent that my father was going to be the better living situation for the kids at that time. So and then we kind of picked up and moved to San Antonio for a little while after that. So it was interesting during that process. I think it was just like this sense of peace that we never had. And I think I remember kind of indulging in that for a while, especially the year that we kind of lived in San Antonio. After that, though, we moved back to Dallas, and that's when things started becoming a little chaotic for myself. I think that I had been exposed to a lot of chaos growing up, and I really unknowingly was trying to create that again in my life. And so I started getting in trouble in school. I started probably hanging out with questionable characters. And this kind of started the stage of me testing out different substances, starting with pot. But I really, as I look back on it, and quite honestly, as I've kind of have dissected my past, the thing that comes up in me is that I really wanted to create some of that chaos again. For one reason or the other, I think my anxiety, some of the other things were just very high. And
it's one of those things where if it's normal and what we've known, even if it's dysfunctional, it's more comfortable because it's what you knew how to survive in and function in. And it's not that abnormal, I think, for a lot of us who grew up in dysfunctional family systems.
Sure. Yeah. And it progressed. It progressed through that. So like I said, marijuana was the first thing. It was the first substance that I used that really had an effect. I was probably, I know for sure I was in the 5th grade. My friend had gotten a hold of some from his father, and we went out in the creek, and there were a couple of us, and we were smoking weed, and I remember this profound sense of like togetherness, bonding in that moment that it's nothing that I ever felt. I had never felt closer to people until that moment. It made me drop all of my discomforts, all of those things, those differences, that anxiety, and still to this day I think about that moment, and as I speak to it, and can feel how impactful that was, and then after that, it was, you know, the gates were kind of released for me. I wanted to chase that feeling as much as I possibly could, trying to, you know, and being younger is a lot harder to get, you know, some of these things, and especially marijuana and things like that. But I started trying to figure out, you know, how to get it, you know, you know, getting into parents' liquor cabinets, you know, trying to figure out different, you know, pills and things like that I could get a hold of. And as I grew up, you know, those things became regularly more available for me. This was more, I speak to Dallas, but we were more in like the Plano area growing up over in Dallas, if anybody's familiar with Texas or anything like that. But
I haven't told you this yet, but that was actually where I was born.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Plano, Texas.
Yep. Moved away when I was probably 2 years old, though, so I don't really know anything or remember anything about it.
Yeah, you know, I still have a lot of friends over there, and it's a great little community. There's also a lot of trouble that you can get.
I hear that a lot as well. Yeah. So you know, you've kind of shared about like, hey, you found that connection, you found a solution. You found a solution that provided connection that you were seeking, and, you know, escaping discomfort. And so, you know, I think a lot of us can relate to that. But what happens, you know, take us to the place where, you know, consequences started to come into play. What did that look like on your life? Was it affecting your education? What point was that, and where did it take you?
Yeah, it did. It affected a lot, especially with school. I just did the bare minimum, you know, that it took me to have no questions, to, you know, to pass. Sometimes I didn't pass, you know, depending on what was going on, especially later on. You know, I think we're talking about middle school, things like that. There were things that I just didn't show up to anymore because of really just trying to chase these substances. You know, I remember trying to, you know, sneak like liquor and water bottles and things like that in school, and I really I wanted to be around the other individuals. I think earlier on, you know, when I was, you know, very young, it was very questionable to kids, right? Of like, you know, you're doing anything, you know, any drugs or anything like that. But as I started getting older, I was starting to find more of my group that was you know, going to be involved with that. And so yeah, I got suspended. I got you know, I got kicked out of some schools. I started getting in, you know, involved with getting in trouble with law enforcement, and, you know, caught with different substances, caught with things that I shouldn't have had. So yeah, that I want to say that the trouble started getting there pretty quickly. As I started needing to move schools, I ended up getting expelled from the Plano district, and I needed to go into an alternative program. And very quickly there, I got in trouble for bringing substances in, and a kid ended up actually having a bad reaction to something that I gave him, so it turned into a really scary thing. You know, luckily nothing happened to that individual, and you know, and they were okay, but all eyes were on me, and so I had to kind of go through those consequences. Because at that time, I think my family was just really, they were just very confused. They were baffled on, you know, what I was going through. And so they went ahead and took me out of that alternative school program after everything settled down, and they put me into a private school It was an amazing experience. I went to a Lutheran school over there in Dallas, and it was great. I got to be around, a lot of people that were progressing. I did fairly well in their system. And I think it was kind of a chance for me to try to reframe. And so it was almost like the early stages of trying to change my life.
Sure.
When
so as you say that, I have a specific question in
Sure.
that regard, and it's kind of multi-part. So I think we all have varying stages where shame starts to play, shame, guilt, denial, all play their own role in this cycle that we go through. And so, as you're going through your consequences in school, you pulled out of this one, going to that one, and what have you, before you got to this one where you started to straighten up somewhat. What did you have that self-realization, the kind of the shame spiral of things not going well, or did you just not care? Like, where were you with that? And when you finally got to this school and started doing better, what was your level of honesty with yourself? And where did that take you?
I think I had a great level of shame. I wanted to do well. I really, and especially when it was towards like my father in general, like kind of going back to the way he viewed work, the way that he was very career driven. I respected that growing up. And he always did his best to try and teach us good work ethic. And so I think like through these things, I remember I was like, I always wanted him to just be mad, right? Just be mad. I didn't want him to be disappointed. Yeah. And so I wore that a lot, as I grew up. I couldn't figure out, what was going on. I couldn't figure out why I kept on behaving these ways. And so as I'm kind of going through these processes, as these things are happening and these consequences are building on themselves, I am continuing to just shovel that on myself, and wear that as a person. I felt like I was just a bad person, right. Just
it starts to become your identity. Yeah, it's rough. Yeah, and it's something rough. I think that, man, me and probably everyone listening who's currently struggling or is in recovery can identify with, because you start to get, I started to get, I don't know, I won't speak for you, but you get to that place where you almost don't remember what it felt like not to identify that way, because it feels like this is who I always was. I just hadn't realized it yet, and I don't know that there's any other future for me. Wow. Would you say that's the same?
I would definitely say that, Patrick. And I think walking through this right now, it's so interesting to feel these feelings as we're talking about it, because I haven't told my story. It's been a while. It's been too long, actually, since I've told my story. And so as I think about that, I remember, meeting with, principals, meeting with, even law enforcement and things like that. And they would be taught, they'd be like, you seem like a good guy. You seem like a good person. You just need to straighten these things out. And internally, like, I think deep down in there, I knew that I was a good person. Like, I knew that I had morals. I even could see the times that I was crossing over, but I would just justify the heck out of it. Just to push me into that place to just to get back to the next use, the next substance. And so as we kind of go through there, you know, I think I'm going to this school and I'm trying to give it my all. You know, I'm giving it my all, and but I just don't have like either I don't have the experience or I just don't have the tools to be able to piece it together. I think academically I was doing well. I was learning a lot of different things. I was exposed to some really, really great friends and things like that in that school. But I ended up getting booted from that school. And it was because I had gotten in trouble outside of school that ended up with me being in juvenile hall. I actually, as I think about it, I ran away from home. I was still struggling with those old friends and like this new situation. And so I ran away from home. You know, I think I spent about a couple of months missing. And during that time, it was rough. I ended up, getting some new teeth, things like that, just from, you know, using substances, saying things I shouldn't have said to people that I shouldn't have been around. So, you know, I ended up getting in juvenile or juvenile hall or kid jail, or, you know, or whatever you want to call it. You know, the school that I was at, they couldn't really be, they didn't want to continue having me at the school, you know, once they kind of heard those things. And also the only way that I was really going to be able to get out of the deal that they had made is I had to go to a boarding school. And so I ended up going to, and I speak to this, this was a really, really good thing for me. It was hard for me. I went to boarding school for 2 years over in Waco, Texas, and exposed to, you know, great counselors. It put me in a different scenario that I had ever been with. And so there was like a boarding school for, you know, kids that were, you know, getting in trouble a lot. But there was also another section that it was for foster children, you know, and so they would it was a foster care, and so the it was a great experience. I got to be mixed in with so many different people from so many different backgrounds, and although if you would have talked to me while I was there, I really disliked it, but as you know, as I'm older, I really see what that exposed me to, and it was a good experience. Again, though, you know, I did what I needed to do to get out of trouble in the eyes of the law, and my family really wanted to keep me there, but after I knew that there wasn't anything on me or overseeing me, I think the last 6 months that I was there, you know, I was bringing drugs onto campus, and I was distributing it, you know, within the campus and things like that. And so they ended up booting me out of their system, and I had to go back home. So we're talking, I was about 16, 17 at that time. And luckily, I really progressed in school through their system, and I actually got a grade ahead. And so when I got home, you know, finishing out school and doing all those things were easy, but not easy. I just want to say they were already pretty much done. So going back home was from that environment, it just fell apart really quick.
Yeah.
Through the time that I was in boarding school, I had been exposed to heroin. And that was while I was at home on a visit, visiting home. And I remember the first time that I ever got introduced to heroin. I hadn't experienced anything like it, you know, and it really just, it really encompassed everything that I wanted out of substances and just put it in, you know, one tidy package. And I think, I have a lot of things with the first time. The person that gave it to me, they were like, it's opium, it's and
They
it
sold
wasn't
it to you in
IV.
a safer package.
Yeah, right. They put it in a nice thing that seemed like it was going to be okay package. So, so we I think we did it. I remember like being sick, but feeling like I'd never felt before. And I knew for sure, like it was that marijuana situation all over again for me. It was like very impactful. And I obsessed. I started obsessing, and so by the time I ended up getting out of the boarding school and going back home, I knew exactly who I was going to be associating with and what I was going to be doing. And so there was Plano, Texas was actually on the tail end of a pretty big heroin epidemic at that time. And so I went hard. I went hard with using. I got in a lot of trouble with a lot of legal trouble. So there was theft, there was possession, there was, it was almost a monthly occurrence for me. And my family was trying so hard to just keep me out, keep me out of being in jail. And so my father ended up moving to Austin. I was so heavily addicted at that time. This is probably, I'm about 17 at this time. I was so addicted at the time, I couldn't even move with him. Like I had to I was just like, I guess this is where I'm going to be living on my own now. And so that quickly turned into, not having a place to live, staying in my car, staying with different folks that were, again, just in the same place that I was. And so after a while of doing that, I remember really wanting to change again, really getting back to a place. And that was the first time I ever went to treatment. And so I called my mother because I did not want to face my dad and let him know that I was back in a broken place again. And they both kind of figured out a place for me to go up there in Dallas. And it was the first time that I ever truly had to detox. I was 17 at the time. I was actually doing a lot of benzos during this time too. And so,
you had a double detox.
Yeah, it was very, what's funny is I didn't tell them. I tell them I was using heroin, and and my mom's sitting right next to me, so I'm like, and that's it, right? So
man, I think we all. I remember when I went to treatment, and they asked me how much, because at the time my real substance of, I would say, slavery was alcohol, and they asked me how much I was drinking, and I was like, five drinks a day, when in reality I was drinking between a half and a whole handle. We all,
yeah.
I think we all do it. There's too much shame, and we're not ready to, there's a crack in the dam, and we're willing to, reach our hand out and ask for help, but it's so hard to get honest.
For sure, especially with your mom sitting right next to you.
Yeah,
I remember thinking, I was like, man, because they're like, what other substances are you using? I'm like, just, smoking some marijuana and heroin, and and my mom's right there, and I'm like, I could feel her getting crushed, throughout, and I'm just like, and it ended up kicking me in the butt later on during that detox thing. So some medical things were popping up, and they're like, and I was like, they're like, you're just doing, just opiate withdrawal. And I was like, wow, right. Let me tell you some other things. And they're like, oh, okay. So wait, so it was hectic. And from there I went out of detox into an actual treatment facility, the first time. and that was interesting. I think, it was the first time I was really exposed to step work, in recovery. And I think, just being involved with the family stuff, they had family programming and things like that there that that my family was participating, in. And so obviously my mom and my dad, they would do separate, at that time. But it was good. It was a good process. Something that followed me, and this will be, I don't know if a lot of people will relate to this, but as I got out of that treatment center, I remember my father like really highlighting, like, don't ever say that you're an addict, like, don't ever, you're just young and stupid, like, and he's like, you did it, you're getting cleared up. Now take this and you got to move on with your life. But, you're not an addict. Like,
so the message you received when he said that was,
yeah, I'm just young and stupid, like I am. And also, like, I need to learn to control. I need to just drink, like I need to drink. I need to, I just need to learn how to do these things like a proper adult. Right. So, and yes, that's exactly what that message told me. I moved to Austin after that. I didn't go back home to Dallas, which I will say relocating, it helped. I stayed sober for a good 6 months after that treatment center. And part of it was location. Part of it, it was the first time I went to a sober living home. And so, but again, I have that tape spinning around in my head. All these other places are saying you're an addict, addict, alcoholic, and I'm just holding so true to that one thing. And so eventually I ended up relapsing with marijuana. And, being in a new location, being, in Austin, things weren't really, like, I didn't know anybody here. I didn't have any, any resources. So it kind of stuck with marijuana and, some of the here and there things that I could get for a little while. And I think I truly kind of started like that obsession was just like these substances, like the marijuana, like, the pills here and there, like they were not doing it for me. And I remember I was hanging out with, a lot of guys that were in college, a lot of guys that were kind of progressing, in their education and stuff like that. And, through that, I was internally spinning out. Like, I really needed to figure out where I could get some heroin at, like it was like really like, and like, I would say this is about a year's time of like, and so surely, you look hard enough, you're gonna find what you're looking for. And I remember this is where it was so apparent to me. I think when I was in Dallas, everybody was kind of doing the same thing that I was doing, at least my group. This was the part for me where I could firsthand see that, like, I was trying to hide my drug use from people that I did drugs with, like, and so, eventually they saw, they're like, man, this guy is really going hard. And so, I continued to do that. I had, other encounters with law enforcement. Law enforcement is just, it's, if I was using a substance, they were very quickly behind me, for one reason or the other. And so, I had, I'm trying to think, I ended up getting myself on some probation. And throughout this probation, you know, I would end up failing drug tests or getting in trouble again and needing to go to treatment or, you know, something to kind of appease the law in some situation. And so this turned into a thing for me where really my willingness and things like that, like I would go, you know, to not be in trouble, but there was not a lot of like, it was like, I'm being forced to do this,
right.
You know, and that really just continued to happen. And so I'd go to treatment, I'd do something, I'd do an IOP program. I would do something to just like sign off on that everything's good. And then just go back to doing what I was doing. And so I want to say I had I had a similar experience. I got out of treatment. My family, they wanted to go on a vacation. And so I remember, and this is it's a significant piece, and that's why I'm kind of going in depth with it. I'm just getting out of treatment. Family's going on vacation. My probation officer at the time was like, you can't leave the state, you know, and you just got out of treatment. So we need to kind of keep you here.
Yeah.
And I remember it was kind of, you know, my family's just like, well, we're going to go, you know, just stay at the house and, you know, here's some money. So they give me some money for about 2 weeks, you know, that they're going to be gone. And some part of me really wanted to be sober. You know, I think you know, and I really just didn't want to go straight back out to where I was whenever I had gotten into that treatment center. I remember I barely spent that money. Like I stayed inside like the whole 2 weeks that they were gone, you know. And I remember there was this girl that I had met in treatment that was, she kept on trying to contact me. I really liked her. I thought, you know, this, maybe there a potential relationship or something. And she was contacting me through this time, and I wouldn't go see her. I was just like, I'm staying inside. I'm not gonna get in trouble here. Well, as soon as they got back, something like lifted. It was like I did it, right? Like I didn't do anything like while they were gone. I went straight over to this person's place where they lived, their apartment. And it was like straight into automatic mode for myself. Like we went and we scored. And unfortunately, at least my experience was like my mind, like it doesn't go into, I've been sober for, you know, 50 days, you know, right, or anything like that. It goes straight back to the last time that I used. And I ended up using, I had a bad overdose.
Wow.
And it, you know, this person just thought I was sleeping, apparently. And they thought I was sleeping for about 3 days. And I was on, I guess they were checking that I was breathing, checking that my heart, you know, was still going and things like that. But I had severe muscle atrophy on the right side of my body, a lot of nerve damage. Some of my internal organs were shutting down, kidney failure and things like that. So by the time I woke up and we could really apparently see that things were wrong. You know, I couldn't move. You know, they just left me in front of the hospital. It was kind of one of those scenarios that you see in the movies and things like that, because they didn't want to get in trouble.
Right.
And as I look back on it, you know, I'm just glad they took me to the hospital.
Yeah.
You know, and so I kept on coming in and out of consciousness for the next couple of days. I remember this moment was so impactful for me because I, you know, throughout these, you know, this timeline, my, like I was just we talked about that shame and we talked about all those things. Like So all of that is there, present, internal, and I'm feeling it. You know, I get into this place where I almost lose my life, you know. And I remember waking up, and my family is there in the hospital room, and I wake up, and I'm just I'm crying. I'm like so upset, and you know, they're all crying. You know, they're just, you know, they're happy that I'm alive. You know, I'm in ICU. I've got tubes everywhere. You know, they're letting them know that, you know, I'm recovering, that, you know, things are going to be good. And the only thing that I could think at that time was like, I was so upset that I was still alive. You know, like that again, here I am hurting everybody that loves and cares about me. And like, it was like this thing in my mind where it's just like, I wish that I would just go, like, you know. And you know, I think about that. It makes me it makes me upset, you know, just thinking about how low I was, you know, at that time in my life. And that I just didn't want to feel like that shame and that guilt, and like I was just letting everybody down. You know, I talked about, you know, my family dynamic being, you know, there being some hard things, but all in all, my family has been very loving, you know, and, you know, they did whatever they needed to do for me. They continued to try to lift me up. They continued trying to bail me out of jail, getting me to different treatment centers, doing all these things. And so they didn't give up, you know? And so, you know, I think at that time, that was it was one of the first experiences that I had that was profound. And from there on, you know, it took me a little while to stay sober. Yeah, I went through a couple of treatment centers. I actually went through the Right Step in Wimberley, you know, a few years back, and you know, it's so great being out there now, you know, and it's just a blast from the past. You know, I met a lot of different individuals. The staff, everybody's different now. You know, it's not. But the facility still looks very similar. So it's just so awesome to be out there. And kind of moving forward from there, there was a couple more times that I got arrested. There was definitely a couple more treatment stays, but I ended up going to a long-term treatment center. And this was actually, let me take a few steps back really quick, just to, throughout that timeline, you know, of trying to stay sober, continuing to relapse, going through that cycle. I met, actually I didn't meet, there was an individual that I had stayed connected with since I was in that boarding school out in Waco, you know, so for a little while. And, you know, we lived together. She ended up becoming pregnant with our child. And, you know, through that, you know, we tried to do everything that we could as far as like staying sober, making things work. You know, we had a little apartment, and but you know, it went downhill very quickly with just using drugs, you know, and continue that cycle. And I actually I never was really like utilized meth or anything like that. I'd been exposed to it, and I'd done it, you know, a few times before, and I knew that I didn't like it and not necessarily, but I was, other than, you know, heroin being my drug of choice, you know, I was pretty much a trash can. You know, anything that was going to change the way that I felt.
Yeah.
Well, I had gotten a hold of a pretty big quantity of some crystal meth, and I ended up kind of spinning out using that. And so I ended up in the hospital again, and it wasn't, I was hallucinating. I was, going.
It was more psych related than physical.
Yeah, yep. Correct. And so I think that at this point, I remember I'm getting out of the hospital. They ended up doing a spinal tap on me for one reason or the other. I think that they were just really trying to figure out, and that sucked. It just was the worst. Also, like, I'm like, there's like a small percentage of people, like, whenever they give you that they do that procedure on you, like, you're like, it doesn't heal properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had like spinal fluid like leaking out of my back, during this time. And my family thought that I had cooked myself. Like, basically, yeah. I was unfunctional. I could not even stand up. Like,
wow.
And so they were kind of in the idea that they're like, okay, like, this is pretty much like
what's left for him. Yeah.
Yeah. They ended up they took me back to the hospital, and they're like, oh, your wound back there with the procedure didn't heal, so you're just leaking spinal fluid. So that was so interesting, because they actually inject fluid in there, and it's like, just like that, like, I felt much better. So, like, everything was back to normal. But I do remember having the conversation, and it was, I wanted to go to a long-term mental institution at that point, and I remember talking to my father. My girlfriend at the time was pregnant with our kid, and and we're not able to figure out how to be sober, how to just function, and so I was just like, hey, like, can I go to like a mental, because obviously addiction isn't the thing. Like, there's obviously something terribly wrong with me, and we both went, to some psych hospitals, and we did all of the stuff, and they're like, like, you just got to go back to treatment, like, you are, you're operating well, there's signs of severe depression and things like that are associated with the addiction. But, and it like, me and my father both kind of like, but we've been there, we've done all of this work, and so how many, and they're like, these are the resources that are available for, and so I went back to a detox center. I remember, it's so quick, these ideas and that ego and that pride and those things that start kicking in very quickly when you have just a little bit of time clean. Yeah. I remember it's like, you kind of recoil on everything that you committed to doing. And so through that, I went through detox. I got released to go home because I was refusing to go to treatment afterwards after that. And I remember sitting down, and I had stayed sober through the couple of days that I was at home, and I'm on the phone with my friend, and I'm already getting the ball rolling for different things. I wasn't immediately looking for substances, but I'm starting that old cycle again. My girlfriend is over with her family, and things were not looking good for us at that time. Her family didn't want her to have anything to do with me, and and at that point, I think that I'm trying to run from those feelings of like, I don't know what's going on. There's a bunch of chaos going on in my life. And so I remember my father being like, hey, there's this place that I want you to go check out. You don't have to stay, but like, bring a bag with you, like, just in case you want to. And some might have shared the same experience of this, but so I remember being on the phone. I'm like, hey, look, like, I got to go check this place out to make Pops happy. And I'll talk to you here in a few hours. We're going to go check it out. But I'll be right back, basically.
Yeah.
And we went there, and I got out of the car, and he drove away. And so that's how I went to the last treatment center, and I stayed there for about 4 months. I stayed there, and I learned a lot of great things. I actually went through the 12-step program fully, while I was there, and it got exposed to the tools, and I really kind of focused on like the tools, right, of being able to actually walk through these processes of recovery. I had never done that before. I talked about my girlfriend, being pregnant. I was going through a lot of different hardship with that, and luckily I was able to see my son be born the day before I got discharged from treatment. And it was hard, it was a hard situation. It was very, very awesome to be able to experience that and to witness my son being born. But we were definitely not on good terms, me and my ex. And so my family and her family were trying to negotiate terms. And I was just basically trying to get out of treatment and figure out, how to maintain some sobriety and to get sober. But the terms that they were trying to negotiate with my father were just not viable. And the thing is my family wanted custody of the child, and they were willing to do that, but they wanted my ex to live with my father. And at the time, my dad is just like, this is like just a sentence for my, like, they're just going to continue to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so it turned into a closed adoption for my son, and so that was something for me that was so heavy. I felt like my world was kind of crumbling down as I was starting to try and change my life. And so
when you say closed adoption, so I understand what the closed adoption piece means, but who adopted him?
Anonymous. Basically an anonymous family adopted my son. And I think that has been something that I've had to walk through, for many years. I think kind of grasping on to it's just really kind of that hurt and that pain of not being able to be in my son's life. And so there's also a lot of things that I have to I have to go through. I was young, I was doing drugs. I was making very bad decisions, as far as up to that point.
Right. And
nobody could, my track record showed that I didn't stay sober. I was a chronic relapser, and, in the eyes of everybody else, I had so much resentment, during this process. I had so much internal stuff that was going on, more so than I ever had in my whole entire life. There was just and it was so interesting through treatment. I picked up some of these tools, and as I was walking through these things, all I had access to was some of these tools to utilize. I got a sponsor before I discharged from treatment. I started, going to my aftercare programs, and I would just show up and I would just be in tears, and just completely broken. These people, they held me up, you know, they knew that I was struggling. And these tools that I learned, like, it was the first time that I was able to actually utilize a system that was bringing me relief other than utilizing drugs and alcohol, you know, to kill and numb that pain. And it was really rough. It was rough. Like, you know, my first year in sobriety, I fell and I got back up. I would fall and I would get back up. And, you know, all I knew was just, I could not use. I couldn't use. And to continue to go to these meetings, continue to go to my aftercare program, continue talking to my sponsor on a sometimes a multiple day basis. And, you know, it really showed me that something else could actually work, just diffuse that situation. As much as it hurts to know that I'm not in my son's life, you know, I think that I kind of have this sense that, you know, at some point, you know, my higher power is going to bring this together, you know, and I've got so much knowledge out of that pain, and I think that it really just kind of was, it was all of the things caving in on me that really took it to the place for me that it was like
final radical surrender that
exactly. Yeah. So, you know, through the rest of, you know, this is back in 2010, 2011. So it's been, you know, I've been sober over 10 years now. Life has just brought me so many things. I've gotten the gift to actually work in great treatment centers along a lot of great individuals, and helping individuals kind of understand, you know, and find their own path.
Yeah.
I continue to, you know, work on myself in a lot of different ways. I talked about therapy very early on. I still highly utilize therapy in my own life, you know, and so and I'm a strong advocate for it. I do AA, you know, it works for me. I know that, you know, you know, some of the old timers might not like that I'm going to their, you know, AA meetings and things like that because I identify with substances, but it's just something, it's worked for me. And so I continue to just
absolutely,
you know, utilize those stuff. So,
I have a question. We're running close on time here, and sure. I want to wrap things up by asking you a final thought on, you know, you are clearly at a place where life is good and fruitful, and you're happy and healthy, right? So I remember back when I was struggling, and to see somebody like you, I literally said, this person is not like me. This person is, you know, yeah, they say they struggled and all those things, but like, I can't imagine being able to be at this place in life like he's talking about. So, you know, final thought that you want to leave with our viewers, you know, to that man or woman who's suffering similarly to how you did, what would be that piece of advice that you would give them?
Sure. Yeah. You know, I truly identify with that, you know, with, you know, I always wanted to recognize the differences more than the similarities. And so, the strongest advice that I can give anybody that is trying to really kind of change their path is like, stop getting in your own way, you know, like, and really just, you know, if you're trying to find, you know, something new to establish in your life, you know, stop talking yourself out of it, you know. I think that's really kind of the biggest thing that I learned is just like, I could talk myself out of anything, you know, I could really, but if I just take that ego and that pride and all of those things, you know, and just move them aside and just say, you know, this is just a moment right now, you know, what can I get out of it? You know, what can I get out of this moment that's going to be impactful? And so, yeah, I think that's
Awesome.
what I would say.
Very cool. I couldn't agree more. And the last thing I'm going to say to add on to that, I always close our segments out by saying if there's one thing that you do if you are suffering today with mental health, addiction of any sort, is just like Nic said, you know, stop overthinking it and take a step of just telling someone that you trust. Stop suffering in silence, and just tell someone if that's the only thing that you do. So with that, Nic, thank you so much. It's been great to hear your story, and I know a lot of people are going to get some wonderful help out of it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Patrick. It's been my pleasure for sure.
Yes, sir. All right. With that, take care of yourself.